Hello, fillies and gentlecolts. Welcome to another intriguing, exciting, and thrilling episode of Stableside Discussions, Disputes, and Debates. I am once again your humble host, Misfortune, and it has been a busy week. The Equestrian Critic Society has been working doubly hard than it ever has to get our reviews out the door. Our new techie Hingard is being a lazy butt, or something, and is leaving tech duties to my very incapable hands, as you might no doubt tell. And lastly, I've been working my tail off on getting a new chapter of my story, The Price of Loyalty, out the door. So that's been kind of zany, if not stressful, and costing me lots of precious sleep, which I'll also be lacking a little bit of in today's episode. But not to worry, because this is SD3, the show where the host is unimportant, the guests are, and this is generally disorganized chaos anyway. The only real effort is having to do some blackmail, bribing, and coercion, and other dirty methods of asking special guests to come on the show to share their thoughts and opinions on things. And do you think it's easy? It's not. In fact, we had to go the extra mile to get you guys our very special guest today, so I hope you're all grateful that I trade precious hours of sleep and hours of... I'd otherwise be doing very important things, like video games or writing stories about ponies, because, that's what many men normally do, instead of trying to host the world's most impromptu talk show. Actually, I take that back. That honor goes to Whose Line Is It Anyway, I think, or maybe even that show Conan runs, or whatevs. Anywho, my needs are unimportant, your guys' are, so I'm assuming they are for me to shut my trap and introduce our awesome guest joining us today. So let's get to that, shall we? For today's workshop, we will be talking about how to write original characters, or rather, good original characters. And the special guest joining us today certainly knows a thing or two about the rather difficult craft. He wrote a whole darn book of it after all, which, is it even published in physical paper and cardboard form yet?
It's on the way.
It's on the way, right? But yes, this particular special guest has had a bit of experience and even quite a bit of success with what we'll be talking about today. So we couldn't really think of anybody better to come and share their thoughts on the subject. He is by far the most special, if not the most relevant to our origins, guest to come onto our show today, and I cannot tell you guys how excited I am to interrupt him into our minuscule little show. Ladies and gentlecolts, I am proud to present to you our very special guest of the day, the author of the smash hit Past Scenes, a very enjoyable and intriguing story surrounding a cute little character called Nix, a story I'm sure many of you are very familiar with, by the way. Members of my wonderful audience, I give you Penstroke.
Hello, everyone.
Sorry, I couldn't give you a big applause or anything like that. We haven't really worked soundboards or special effects in the show yet.
Is that better? Is that what you were hoping for?
Just a little bit. Maybe we could have gotten a drum roll. Maybe we could have did some fancy picture or some sort of graphic. Hopefully your audience today, or your appearance today, will up our ratings as well as our budget so we can make fancy things happen like special effects and soundboards and so on. But hey, if you, my audience, want to see soundboards, let us know on our YouTube channel post-show. Anywho, Penstroke, welcome to the show. I don't think there are enough words in the English dictionary to describe how excited I am to have you here today to share your wisdom and opinions with us today.
Glad to be here.
Okie doke. And yes, audience, I gave Penstroke a big segment because he's a cool guy who wrote a cool story. Of course, he gets an episode where he gets the spotlight for himself for a minute or so. Anyway, back to the more standard procedure. Of course, we cannot have a talk show without other panelists. Do you think Penstroke's the only awesome individual we have on our show today? Well, I'd like to say you are gravely mistaken. Joining us would be Silverquill and my critic BronyWriter, but they may not be able to appear on the show today, or will be late, whatever happens first. But we did manage to pull a random pony off the street that we have kidnapped, interrogated, and made sure was a good fit for the show. So, Laichonious Raposo, pardon me if I get that wrong, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks.
Don't worry. We'll make sure everything's all painless once we get this out of the door. But anyway, now before we begin the discussion proper, I cannot speak English today. That is my tiredness kicking in, ladies and gentlemen. It isn't obvious by now. We need to know the fighters in the corners of our ring of our bout of verbal warfare. So, Penstroke, why don't you kick us off by telling us a bit about yourself, what you do, what you write, and maybe share with us your experience and thoughts on the matter of original characters. Gloating is permitted, just so you know.
Well, with that kind of invitation, it's hard not to. So, with the name aside, I've been writing in the fandom for what's a little over 2 years now. First story I wrote and published that was all by itself on a post for EQD was Better Living Through Science and Ponies. And since then, I've grown my catalog of tales to about 15 stories total. Most recent ones were Winter Bells, A Zebra in the Bed, and Into the Depths. Currently working on a new story that was supposed to be a one-shot. It is now looking to be about 7 to 8 chapters. The bloat, but it should be all good. It should be all good. And as to the subject of OCs, I feel the best way to write OCs, at least for background characters, is to get as deep as they need to be for a given situation, but don't go writing a whole new main character for someone who's going to just be in the bar once. And then for main characters, just to do your best to give them both their pros and their cons.
That seems like a very excellent explanation. And by the way, we now have Quillbit Marelor, who is a very unexpected member of my Critic team, to join us on the show today.
Yes, hello.
I'm sure many of our regular viewers would know who you are, Quillbit, so I don't think... We'll skip your introductions.
I need no introduction.
Of course you don't. Anyway, folks, Quillbit. Laichonious Raposo. I know you went through the interrogation process, but the guys in charge of that never actually told me any of the information they were supposed to coax out of you. So would you be so kind as to tell my audience and I who you work for? What you do, why you do it, what you're writing, etc.
Alright. Well, I got into ponies about a year ago. Almost exactly. Give or take a couple months. I started writing fanfiction shortly afterward, and I kind of ended up with a story that got really big for no particular reason. A lot of people know me as the author of The Great Brony Migration. Since then, I've run into some great people and written 5 stories that I have posted so far. I'm currently working on a new story, and I'm trying out a new method for posting, where I'm going to finish it first, and then I'm going to post these chapter in sequence like a TV show. But yeah, I love writing, love reading. I love English. I'm an English tutor at the college that I'm attending right now, so that's my days are writing, pretty much.
That's excellent. I wish I could work in English, because English is such a fascinating language to teach and learn, and try to learn all the intricate things about verbs, adjectives, and so on. That's great stuff. We love it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for being so cooperative. I'll let the torture guy know to take it easy on you after today's episode is done. And like I said, Quillbit needs no introduction, because she's Quillbit Marelor. I'm never going to get that right.
No, you're not.
So, I suppose that is our panel today. Now, we come to the fun bit, the discussion itself. So yeah, Quillbit, we're skipping over introductions. And all that fun jazz. You don't get a say in the matter.
Well, can I just point out something?
Sure, why not?
Your voice is coming in like...
Yeah, that is my crappy audio at work. I cannot do anything about it. It's a $5 webcam, so sue me. If you guys want me to be better audio, whatevs, I could use $10 to get a new microphone.
And the quality will be doubled.
It will be doubled. It will be tripled.
And I apologize to everyone for making that joke, but the setup was too perfect.
Indeed it was. So, let us get into the discussion. For today's workshop, I think we're going to be trying something different. For those of you who hasn't checked in last week, our workshops are basically an experimental thing we are doing, where we're going to be providing tips on how to be better at things, because, you know, that's something people like to do. They like to share their opinions on how to be good at things. And these people that have come to share their experience on how to be good at things. Last week we were talking about pacing, because, you know, that's That's a very iffy topic in the subject of fan fiction, so we had a fun discussion with that last week, and I basically hosted the entire thing. For this particular thing, I'm going to be doing less talking and providing tips, and I'm going to leave that here for my panel to discuss. Hopefully that will result in less of boring, unimportant, and really scratchy or horrible sounding me, and more of the good stuff with them. What we'll do is I'll ask about a particular bullet point, maybe jump in a discussion or two, and the rest we'll just kind of improvise, because that's what we do here at SD3. Right, so to take it away and let my panel speak for me, well, maybe not, let's start with explaining the obvious. What are original characters? It's pretty self-explanatory, I know, but I guess I'm going to do it anyway. Just real quick, and sorry to be stealing your guys' thunder. I know the anticipation to speak is riding high here, but original characters are just as they sound, original, and they are not from the source material of which all of us are writing fanfiction on. They're characters with their own history, personality, appearance, motives, and so on. Now, what many of you may agree on is that original characters are a very, very touchy topic regarding our beloved fanfictions. You all know the Mary Sue and the black and red bat-winged alicorn stereotypes that we've all but made fun of repeatedly at this point. But the truth of the matter is that original characters are hard to pull off, not in the form of writing, but trying to get them to generate an audience. After all, lots of other folks prefer reading stories about the already established characters from the show, even if the author gives them a different interpretation. It's kind of what the general consensus is. Original characters, or OCs, are much harder to sell to a reader because they've been beat to death, unfortunately, by the stereotypes I mentioned earlier. There's been very, very few standouts out there who have been able to make a story work without the need to rely on the pre-established characters. And other such examples like that. However, they do come with one benefit, and that is they are far, far easier to write, at least in my opinion, than the pre-established characters. Since OCs allow you to have complete and total control over who your characters are, so you can come up with personality changes and have them do things that they wouldn't normally do without even batting an eye. I'm like,
well, I don't. Now, wait.
Uh-oh.
Now, I would argue no. I would have to argue no. Because the thing is, it's like you can set up the character change. You can come to understand your own character a lot more than some of the canon characters, just because you have to form them in your head, and it's like assembling a car engine. It's like if you buy a car, you may in time be able to figure out every nuance of the engine, but if you build a car, you're going to know the thing inside and out for the most part. But the things you were pointing as reasons to why OCs are easier, I wouldn't say make them easier. I would say those are the pitfalls that some people find make them bad. Like sudden, personality changes and whatnot that may come out of left field, and the reader thus finds it hard to believe that, for example, this character was so indignant, but now he's all butterflies and rainbows.
I really think I was kind of exaggerating, but the point is that you have a lot more control and freedom with your characters over the MLP characters, where if you try to make them do something outside of what they are, who they are, and so on, that will cause mass hysteria, maybe even riots and so on, or just downvotes, because, those two.
That's I think my personal experience with that is that it's like you don't want to go changing canon characters or even background characters, fandom accepted personalities, unless it's essential to the fic. So to throw an idea off the top of my head, like we all know our fan favorite Derpa Hooves, Ditsy Do, whatever name you prefer, and she has a very strong fandom defined personality. Well, if you wanted to do a story where that was flipped, you would need to make sure that that flipping is essential to the plot, and it isn't just, we're having this cool plot, and as an added bonus, Derpy is acting like Flutter I don't know if I can say the last part of that name on this show. I don't know if it's age appropriate. Discorded Fluttershy. There we go. That's a good way to say it without the B word.
Well, I guess the cursing is allowed, so.
The thing is about fandom given personalities is that some of them can get very boring and very annoying very quickly.
Oh yeah,
yes.
That's very true.
And me, I just don't like the Lyra obsessed with humans. It's just like, that gets so boring so quickly.
Yeah, there's not much you can actually do with that particular horse.
It's an unfortunate circumstance that comes from the things that tend to become like the commonplace of the fandom of like it's a sidewalk tile along the street is like, oh, human. It's like it's another reason why human and equestrian fics get the rap they do is that they feel like they're a dime a dozen and not. It takes a lot of work to give an individual one credence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's very true.
Yeah. I definitely agree with that. I think most of what a lot of people don't understand about creating an original character is just how much work actually does go into making one. They seem to have this preconception that they can just grab a character or just come up with one to fill a part because it's necessary, and then they don't think beyond that, and then you lose a lot of that potential for those characters.
Because it's an original character, that means it's still a character. It's still a character you have to develop fully, give it a personality, quirks, flaws, strengths, weaknesses, all that good stuff.
So I think it's safe to say my argument of them being easy has been quite easily shut down.
Yeah.
But
It is the misconception that they are easy because you don't have to conform to any pre-existing ideas or you don't have to fall in line with what is given in the show, but it comes with its own bag of difficulties because you have to then do a bunch of the balancing yourself of personality quirks versus strengths and all that jazz. And it also, you have to make sure that it's playing well into the environments and whatnot and avoiding the often misappropriately labeled pitfalls of Mary Sue-ness or Gary Sue, or I think that's the male term.
Gary Stu, I think.
Gary Stu.
Alright, well, I personally would love to talk more about how to write pre-established characters today and go into more detail about the pros and cons. I can only hold you guys so long.
Well, I think the best way to talk about pre-established characters is they are original characters that have been worked on for about 6 months, or however long Lauren Faust was doing the original show Bible, and have gotten a lot of developed over the 3 seasons we've seen them. So it's like, if you really, really want your original character to be able to stand and match with the canon ones, yeah, that may be the kind of time commitment you're looking at.
But at least it's a fair point to say that each kind of has their own pros and cons to them. Because, I seriously imagine original characters are just kind of easy to come up with, but just hard to make them good, fleshed out, and make them just work at times. Because it's easy to make a character and just tell them to do whatever you want without anyone calling BS on like one of the main 6 characters doing something weird. But yeah, you do have some good points there, Pinstruct. They are definitely a lot more trickier to write. This is, I suppose, why we have this topic today.
To come to a median with your point, it is OCs get more difficult the more involved they have to be in the story. A bartender who is going to give one line when he delivers the drinks to a table can probably just be as flimsy as a piece of paper, unless he's going to come back in the story later. But if you're looking at an OC that's going to be the main character, then they need that depth.
Alright. So, let's go ahead and start really digging into the topic of OC. But for the first thing, why don't we talk about, I suppose, maybe preferences of writing OC over MLP characters. Penstroke, would you say you might have a bit of a preference for writing OCs over MLP characters, or anything in that regard?
Well, honestly, if you look at your stories, you'll see I mostly work with canon or background ponies at the worst. I mean, even Nyx is arguably something of a half-breed or a reimagining of Nightmare Moon, or Amnesia Reset as what the TV tropes term probably is.
Retcon.
But I've had my share of OCs or characters that were inspired. Like the one that jumps to mind right now is Third Eye from Haunting Nightmare. He was my fun, crazy pony.
These are always great ponies to ride. Laichonious.
It's Laichonious, but you can call me Like if you want.
Like. Yeah, I like that. Like. Alright, what would you have to say about writing OCs over MLP characters?
Well, in terms of fan fiction, I think I do have more of a preference to work with the main six or established ponies. It's easier to imagine, I think, scenarios that you could put them in that would bring to light one of their qualities. So when you go to do that with an OC, you have to take into account the kind of interaction that they're going to be having. One of the things that I think hurts a lot of OCs is whether it's on purpose or not, a lot of writers are putting their OCs in an antagonistic position by making them so different from their surroundings. It can work sometimes, but too often it just kind of dissolves into being really annoying. So as far as OCs and My Little Pony, I like to reimagine or to push the original characters into new situations.
I suppose the short version, as you say, you prefer MLP characters over OCs when you're doing your writing?
I'm sorry, what was that?
So I think you were trying to say you have a preference for MLP characters over writing OCs?
I do like the character types in MLP, and that was just for fan fiction. I don't do any other kind of fan fiction, but for my own writing, yes, everything has to be an OC for independent writing, and it takes a lot of work.
Indeed it does. Quillbit, what are your 2 cents on this?
Well, I think I might have, problems with both, because if I'm doing, like, canon characters, I'm worried about, okay, I'm actually doing the character justice. Is this actually what the character would say? Is this how they would say it? Is this actually something they do? But, with OC, I haven't had much experience with OCs. The one OC I have now is not really working out pretty well, because there are problems creating an OC, such as giving them an actual personality and not just having them being blandness the whole time. I guess what I found is that it's kind of easy to work, well, a little more simple to write characters that they're kind of in between. They're like secondary characters. Like my one fanfic, it's about Cloud Chaser and Flitter, and it was kind of easy to write for those characters, seeing as they don't really have defined personalities, at least none that I've really heard of.
It is kind of just their character appearance in the show, and it's a reason why writing stories about background ponies is something that's a bit popular, and why the MLP FIM wiki has like this insane database of all the names that people have come up as the semi-official names. So I hate some of the names they've come up with. I really do. But it's like the background pony that never said a word but just appeared kind of becomes this nice middle ground in that some of the stigmas around normal OCs about self-insertion and all that stuff get brushed under the rug because, it's not. It's this character from this scene from this place. Even though the author is still wholly responsible for putting a personality to that character. And coming up with a personality has also made just a little bit easier because you have a character design to work off of, and a character design alone can give a great deal of personality to a given character.
Alright, so I think it's safe to say we got some really good ideas on the pros and cons and so on to OCs. So I think people can kind of see what the problems are and what the perks are. And that's kind of a very important thing we need to establish before we get into the rest of the discussion. So, one of the big things we definitely want to tackle in this is how to write good OCs that are interesting and how to maybe get readers' attentions, because those are definitely hard feats to accomplish. So I'm supposed to kick this off and how to snag your readers' attention and get them interested in OCs. Why don't you guys tell us what you think it takes to make a good original character? Like what are the bullet points you would recommend to make a well-developed, well-rounded, I suppose main character OC for now?
One thing I'd say that's important is, and that is something that is a pitfall that comes with OCs, is that the main problem of the plot line that this main character OC has to face has to be something that is challenging to them, and is something that is a difficulty for them to overcome. It's like that's why we like to read stories, is we like to read about the hero winning the day, say, or the completely getting blanked things, the heroes escaping the dinosaurs and whatnot. It's like there's something about your character that makes them somewhat a good fit for being the problem solver, or it's just an unfortunate happen chance of situation. But at the same time, it's like they're not wholly prepared, such that it's like, oh, the plumbing in the castle's broken. Well, we're just gonna call the plumber. Nope. You're gonna make Applejack fix it. Or something like that. And this actually extends to one other aspect, is that a lot of people have stigmas against powerful OCs, like Alicorn OCs or Draconiquist OCs or whatever. And that's usually because the problem that they come up against that they're facing is something their powers can fix. And it suddenly becomes the white elephant in the room, is why didn't they just magic the problem away? And so if you're going to be doing a character that has particular power, then it needs to be a problem they're facing that can't be solved with said power. Like, for example, did a guide a while back for film fiction on a similar subject, and it's like I came up with this random Alicorn Ice Queen OC that's like of the frozen north and whatnot, and so powerful character, but the problems that would be faced in the story would be like those of political things and trying to prevent war and whatnot, and it's like something where brute force and brute magic would only make things worse, and so it becomes a matter of wits rather than power. Okay, I'm done.
Those are some very good tips. Laichonious, what do you have to say on that?
Well, what I got from what Penstroke was saying is he was basically laying out the need for having internal conflict in addition to an external conflict. One of my favorite theorists about stories is Joseph Campbell. If anybody's ever heard of his work, it's some pretty amazing stuff. He has a book called The Hero of a Thousand Faces, and he goes through and he basically outlines what makes a hero a hero. So from what Penstroke was saying, you need to have a character that is, first of all, possessed of a certain number of traits. They need to have a baseline, pretty much. And then you need to put them in a situation, either by happenstance or by fitting them to the situation, but it needs to be something that they can't just do. They have to learn something from it. So the best way to start out with an original character is to write that stuff down first. You, as the author, you need to have that anchor. Because if you can show to your readers what your OC was like before their adventure, and then they can see how they changed through their adventure at the end, that's what makes it really powerful to us. That's what we like about it. As he said, we like to see the hero succeed, but we don't want it to be too easy because then it's kind of empty. There's no real climax.
Yeah, definitely
So-
that. It's like something that a lot of stories use to kind of get themselves going is they have the status quo changing event, and though the story may itself open up late, like out of chronological order, just to get you hooked on like the big battle scene, eventually you get it, usually eventually through flashbacks or through just a jump back in time to go to the start of the story, deals with here's how things were, and here's the first little domino that fell over that started the chain reaction of doom.
Alright, so if I may put a little input onto what you guys are saying, to make a good character, wouldn't it be safe to say a good character comes out of layers? Like starting with a baseline, so you just kind of have the general traits of a character, and then you basically layer them. Like this character never changes or breaks, or like you know the phrase "bend till it breaks" or something like that, bending the rule or whatever. Wouldn't it be safe to say to make a good character you don't go with that type of thing in order to avoid, you know, really weird character transitions like I was mentioning a minute ago? But to make a character truly deep, thoughtful, interesting, it would be built of layers.
Like onion, yes.
Yeah.
Like,
Like an onion, yes. I was trying to avoid that joke.
I'm sorry, you were setting it up and you just kept saying
And I was screwing around it really hard. I know.
it's like, oh, I'm beating around the bush, beating around the bush, beating around the bush, beating around the bush.
I like cake. I would prefer cake.
Alright, let's not dig
Or
too much into
parfait.
Shrek.
Okay, moving on.
Moving on. Quillbit, what do you think also goes into making a good original characters?
I'm trying to think back to maybe stories I've read, or just make them interesting. That's kind of, well, of course, giving them layers, making them more than just this kind of a blank slate character you don't really know much about. Give them a reason worth writing for them. Don't just have them say like blank dialogue and just have a blank kind of character that's just there. Make them involved in something just interesting.
That's a very broad term, by the way, interesting.
It's no matter of opinion, but
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it's a hard word to really define because of that whole opinion thing. But the way that Joseph Campbell did it, and I like the way that he explains what makes a character interesting, is that you can see how they change because you see their faults immediately.
Mm-hmm.
That's the really important part. You don't wait to show some foible of your character. You have to have it out in the open because that's how normal people are. We do try to hide the things that we're not very good at, but in the end, it's pretty obvious to other people the things that we have problems with, and then it's interesting to see how they deal with it.
Alright, so I think this is a good point to transition into how to avoid stereotypes, because this is definitely a very touchy subject, is the stereotypes. And if I may provide just 2 cents, just to get my bit out there, I'd say one thing you can do to avoid stereotypes is you have to come up with like basically a list of who your character is. Like, basically list their pros and cons. They have to have faults, genuine faults that kind of go with their with their pros, I suppose. One way I would always explain this with the layer example is you would have a good character, basically they're at the bottom. But things happen, which is a single layer for each thing that happens, that changes them into the very faulty individual they are now. And that's what gives them depth and not to mention just flaws in general, because that's something a lot of characters tend to not have. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah.
All right, so what else would you recommend to try and avoid stereotypes like the Mary Sue or the being too powerful thing? You guys definitely provided some good examples about how if they have great power, it has to have a situation to kind of balance that, but what else would you...
Well, to actually comment on that, it's like this is reminding me a bit of Ender's Game by I forget his name.
Orson Scott Card.
There we go. It's like the main character in that Ender is like child genius, and so it's like he's a very strong character, thus, but to make it balance, it's like the story and the antagonists, semi-antagonists in the story, keep throwing at him horrible challenges that no normal person would be able to overcome in a billion years. And so it's only because he has that one strength of his that he's able to get by, but that's also leading to kind of him breaking down and getting beaten down into to failure points in ways.
Yeah.
And so I guess that would be my comment about how to avoid, or at least to mitigate, stereotypes. It's like you shouldn't be afraid of the using stereotypes. You should be afraid of using stereotypes in the stereotypical way, because like if you can invert it, then it can become funny, or it can become something of pretty good merit. Like turning a very strong character into where it's like, trying to think of an example. Okay, I'm going back to my Ice Queen Aliquin thing. It's like a very powerful character, used to getting her way, maybe. It's like spoiled brat syndrome when you grow into an adult and expect everyone to be a mindless yes man. It's when someone says no, that can get you mad. They say no again, that can get you furious. They say no a third time, they can make you do something you quickly come to regret, and kind of stacks up its own number of challenges against the character.
Yeah. I think, though, there's the thing with words again. We're using stereotype, which is almost correct when we're talking about these characters. Stereotypes are more created by the people who see them rather than what they are. So what I call them are archetypes. There are certain types of characters that you can use, and you can use them successfully. And just like Penstroke said, you don't want to use them in the stereotypical situation. So like your Ice Queen, what if you had a story with this Ice Queen has all of this power, but then you put her in an external situation in which her powers are useless?
Oh my god, this is reminding me of an anime I heard advertised where, like, the devil is working at a fast food joint.
Yeah, that kind of stuff.
Quillbit, do you have any takes on this?
Well, if anything, to avoid stereotypes, well, to make a character more appealing, I don't know, that's a kind of a different question entirely. Of course, give them flaws, give them a personality, just make them relatable.
Like, as if they were another person that you know off the street. As if they were a friend of yours or someone you know.
Yeah. And one thing I've learned, don't make them too tragic.
Yeah, that's another. That's like the swinging to the opposite end of the spectrum. It's like, okay, you don't want me to make them too strong? Okay, they're weak, they're beaten down, parents were murdered, then their adopted parents died in a car crash, and they've been alone, and it's like that can turn readers off just as quickly as characters that have had the perfect life beforehand is just it turns out to be feeling like you're trying to build up too much sympathy for the character. It's like
it becomes forced.
Yeah, and at the same, especially if that character is in a fairly stable part of his life now, just because like if all that stuff happened before that you said happened, it's like it also becomes like this a testament to how great your character is that they are a semi adjusted member of society after all that happened. Most people after all that happened would be either dead, in jail, or in a psychological hospital.
Oh yeah, I think that's the other part of avoiding those stereotypes is there's too much like for the environment of the story as a whole. You would end up with these super powerful characters or super pathetic characters that are doing their thing, but then the rest of the world just kind of accepts it. They don't question anything. There's no interaction, and that kind of makes it stick out like a sore thumb.
Unless it's portrayed as something of a norm in the story, then otherwise it becomes that question of, okay, to just completely go back to my obscene example, it's like, okay, your parents were killed, your new adopted parents died in a car crash, and then you lived alone since you were 14. Isn't there kind of laws against this? Yes? No? Or especially if this is an Equestria, or a very vanilla version of Equestria from the show, is like, that seems a wee bit dark, considering there's sunshines and rainbows right over there.
Yeah. It's like breaking the suspension of disbelief.
Well, I definitely say I've definitely run to the example of the... I've definitely run the risk of the too tragic character in my particular story. In mine, it's kind of set in a very depressing locale, where things are going wrong, things continue to go wrong, and there's desperation everywhere. And the main character behind that he's a very tragic character, but the situations that he's been put in and the things that have made his location he's based at where it is, I'm trying to avoid spoilers and stuff, but...
in that regard, it becomes, you don't want the characters to stick out from the environment. It's kind of like, it's like, I love my metaphors because I keep using them. It's like, we have a stage play. It's a lovely steampunk set, all that stuff, and then a character walks out in Tron costume. And it's like, he's the only character in Tron costume. It's like, you just can't stop thinking about the fact that he doesn't seem to fit, A doesn't seem to fit in B. Like a square peg in a round hole.
Well, that's definitely something I managed to avoid, so I guess that's good.
So, it's just like, if the environment itself is a very depressing, dark theme, if the whole world is suffering from the same set of situations, then it becomes more believable that a character can have some of the same problems and or worse ones and or slightly better situation, just because it's a variance off the norm. You have to pin yourself on, how is everybody else doing? Okay, now we can start kind of pushing back and forth of, is he worse off than everybody else or is he better off than everyone else?
Those are some very good points. Do you guys have anything you would like to recommend for what not to do with your original character?
That's a list.
Well, by all means, give it to us.
Well, it's like, well, it's easier, I think, if you have an idea of the pieces that make up successful characters. Because then you'll have something of a template to go off of, and when you know the rules, you can break a few of them to make things fun. So, things that you definitely don't want to do with an original character is make them too socially perfect, if that makes sense. They can't go into any situation and just have a golden tongue. They need to have resistance somewhere. If you have a character that's really weak, say physically, or in other means that may be more normal, otherwise, you can't compensate for that by making everyone automatically like them. It doesn't help your character, and it definitely won't help your story because there's no source of friction. There's certain characters that you don't want to put together or that you don't want to use in certain roles. It's just common sense mostly. You wouldn't want to have an average Joe who just knows random things while he's going through his story. You need to show how or why they're good at what they're doing.
Yeah, it's like it's like I have the answer kind of situation can be very detrimental to a thing, to a fic, especially like if, okay, I have to keep coming up with these examples because that's the best way I explain things. Intergalactic conflict with aliens, and your hero's a plumber. It's like
So almost like the Super Mario Brothers movie.
Exactly. It's like expecting the plumber. It's like having the plumber suddenly be able to know how to fix a star drive, just because hey, it looks like a refrigerator engine or motor or something. It's like that is like really the secret to space travel looks like a refrigerator engine and operates like a refrigerator engine. Really? It's like, I mean, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy might be able to get away from that, but that's because it's very tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah, that goes with genre.
Yeah, that
all
goes
that
with
stuff.
genre. It's like it also depends on genre what you can get away with. Because if you're doing something that's very tongue-in-cheek, where it's like, well, yeah, of course, the answer to life is 42 and stuff like that, then you can get away with stuff that's comedic. It's like the Looney Tunes concept is they can only do this, or like some of the people's thoughts around Pinkie Pie is she can only do the weird thing she does when it's going to be funny. It's like, Pinkie, how did you just sprout 2 extra legs? Do it again. Well, I can't do it again. It wouldn't be funny. It's like if that becomes like a defining rule of a given thing, it's like, okay, you can roll with it, and it's like, okay, and then it can even become a solution to a problem. It's like, okay, we need to get up there. If we can make it funny, we can do it real quickly. Let's make it a exercise montage. Getting giggles. I'm enjoying this, but yeah, genre plays into what you can get away with, to be sure.
Quillbit, what do you have to say about what not to do with OZs?
Don't make them too tragic.
Oh boy.
I believe we touched on that.
I believe so too. I could be wrong. Alright, next little tidbit I have to say. What do you guys have to say about self-inserts?
That's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, to be sure. Because part of the trouble is you have to be honest about yourself, and not a lot of people like to be honest about themselves.
They only show their good sides, not their bad sides.
Yeah, it becomes more wish fulfillment than anything.
And it's like the reason it's also got the rap it does is that a lot of the time the story has very little plot in its own. Is that I get to meet ponies. It's the same trappings of human and Equestria, just because it's like those two like to go hand in hand like a couple running down the beach. And it's also kind of, but at the same time, it's like human and Equestria can work, and it usually does work, but it usually has another name when it does work, and that's crossover. It's like when you're mixing two different items and groups, fanons, like I did with Better Living and with Creeping Darkness, is like you can get away with dropping one character in another area or doing the crossovers is like there's still some difficulties with it, but it's generally a lot easier to pull off just because, again, you're working with characters that are not yourself. And at the same time, the one bit of advice I usually give with those crossovers is don't just bring the protagonist over. Bring the antagonist over. In fact, you could just bring the antagonist over and leave the other protagonist there, because that's just a barrel of fun right there.
Especially if it's a very good villain.
It's like Hades. I think there's been a fic. I think I saw it, never read it, where like the classic Disney James Woods flaming-haired Hades was in Tartarus in Equestria, and he needed to then go to Ponyville to get a cup of sugar or something. It's like...
That sounds hilarious.
That does, actually.
I wish I could remember the name of the story, but it's like... But it was literally that. It's like that very charismatic, bada bing, bada boom, Hades in Equestria. It's like putting the villains there can be fun, or it can lead to very grand struggles for the characters that we care about, for example. And the same could be true if you want to like start mixing and matching the villains of MLP with other shows. Like I wouldn't. It's like Discord and Star Trek is just like one that's probably been done a few times, if I can imagine.
A bunch.
If there are two properties, there will be a crossover of it.
Yep.
And then I did hear of one where it's Loki. Like I think like Marvel's interpretation of Loki comes to Equestria, which that sounds like a barrel of fun right there.
Only if Tony Stark follows, in my opinion, because his witty banter in Equestria would just be like awesome sauce, I think.
Well, what if Rainbow Dash is that world's Iron Man? Iron Mare.
Yeah, no, but those generally fall into the inspired by crossover genre, where it's not where you're actually throwing the two together. It's okay, we're taking this loose structure and pulling it in. And I've done one of those in my little sugar shop of horror, where Pinkie Pie finds a plant that likes to eat sweets and eventually grows so big it becomes an issue. That was fun. It's like people were expecting, oh no, it's going to eat ponies. It's like, yeah, I'm not making it that predictable. Not making it that gory either. It's like, it is PG, because I gave the plant Sweet Tooth a different kind of fangs. It was also a fic where I tried to do songs in the middle, and that was an interesting challenge.
I think you hit on a really important point, especially with self-inserts, is to not to go the predictable route. You need to have some innovation. And like you said, it's easier when you're pulling together two different things and you're smashing them into this new product. It's easier to open up possibilities that way. But in terms of self-inserts, you definitely have to be honest, and you have to treat your character, when you write that character into the story, as a character. Once you start writing them into the story, it's not you anymore. You have to keep elements of yourself in it. I mean, you're going to be writing from your perspective, but you have to do everything within the context of the world that you're working with. Otherwise, you get that kind of weird fish out of water feeling, and you're like, I don't know if I should trust this OC, because they're just kind of, you can't see where they're getting their personality traits from. You can't see what's motivating their decisions. And that's what makes self-inserts so hard. It makes sense to you, and you are emotionally invested in that character, because it is you in some way.
The trouble is you have to get other people interested.
Yeah, you have to get other people to see your internal processes.
Alright, and that brings up a very good point, if not the next subtopic. So, how do we sell these OCs to a reader? How do we get their interest early in? How do we basically convince them to want to read our story about an OC?
very difficult because it's the one nature of fan fiction is generally you want to hear more stories about not just the world but the characters. It's like you could hear people could write stories about the griffins or the zebra or whatever, but generally the fics that get popular are the fics about the characters we know and love from the show. And so because that's what people are looking for. It's like during between seasons, it's like, man, I want to hear a story about Fluttershy doing something. It's like you go looking and oh look, there's a story about Fluttershy going to a zoo and being completely horrified. But that becomes the challenge is it becomes trying to sell two things at the same time that not necessarily kind of like a buy one get one where someone isn't sure they want the get one free. It's like, I'm trying to sell you a fanfic. Okay, who's it about? This OC character you've never met before. Can I just have Luna?
Yeah, that's something definitely true, because a lot of people are skeptical early on if they see something about OCs. And that's just the problem with all the stereotypes, beating that dead horse senseless, and basically giving people who want to do OCs no chance. So, what do you guys think it would take to get someone's attention right away?
Something that would help is if you can prove yourself as an author. It's like something some people ask me is how I get the followers I do, and that's because I keep writing. It's like I don't try. It's like I keep putting out stories, and they keep being of a general level of quality, so that the people who read me start to trust me. It's like, okay, this concept for this new story is a little weird, kind of fun, a little weird, but because I know this author, I can trust them. It's like it becomes kind of a build-up where you want to prove to yourself and maybe get that little following of followers going so that you can kind of show that you can handle the canon characters, and that gives you some credence when you try to pull off an OC.
Alright, so what would you have to say about people beginning their humble origins as a writer? Because I'm definitely one of those people. And I'm not sure about Quillbit. I think she falls into the same category. Being kind of one of those new authors who have no name to themselves and they're trying to figure out how to sell their story.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's like, despite how many people hate the submission process or gripe about it, EQD is still a pretty strong place to like just get that signal boost, just because of the hundreds of stories you see update and get posted to FimFiction on a daily basis. It's like you may see one or two on EQD at any given time. And so it still becomes something of a badge of honor, even if some people completely think their system is broken. It's like something that will help just like to get your first story, especially if you're a little anxious about it going, is it's like for people who read my stories, you always notice I got like a dozen people on my pre-reader editor list. It's not like all of them are going through looking for typos. So it's known as like Batty Gloom and Illustrious Q. They're my first pass guys. They read the stories while I'm generally still working on them, and they see the raw content. They suggest places that could do improvements and all that kind of stuff. And they basically are my initial gauge of is this at all fun? And then I get in more pre-readers and they start to catch the grammar stuff, but then they also bring in their own opinions of, oh, this is fun, or oh, I don't get that. It's like you don't want to limit someone to only be grammar checking. You want them to kind of give their opinion at the same time of what makes sense and what doesn't. And that's generally why I have more than a few people on there, is because the more eyes are on it, the more you're going to catch. And that's why EQD actually does this as well. It's like if a fic doesn't pass on its first attempt to be submitted, they'll generally send them to the fic board of Ponychan. I personally don't have a very high opinion of the fic board, but that's mostly because I've been blacklisted there a bit because of past sins. Oh, that's where I found out how many people hate my story. But besides that, it's like there's also groups in FimFiction where it's like author trait. It's like you post up your story, someone will read it, and in return, you just need to read theirs. And it also, reading someone else's story can be a very strong thing to help your own writing. Because if you see something, it's like when you stare at your own work for a long time, it starts to get blurry kind of in your head and in your eyes. It's like you stop noticing things that you may have
They're
noticed
just
otherwise.
black lines. They're black blobby lines.
They're pixels, black and white. But if you look at someone else's story, you may notice something. It's like, oh, they're doing this, but wait, I'm doing that too. A moment of clarity.
Yeah. It's a lot
And it's
easier
also-
to see the faults in other people than it is yourself.
And other people's work generally, yeah, just because it's like, it also comes from the fact that you know so much about the story in your head when you're writing it. It's like the ideas have evolved in there and all that stuff. Basically, it's like the story's living in your head like an apartment, and you know every little nook and thing. The thing about having someone else read it is it's a person, it's like they're going to visit someone's house, and it's like suddenly all the little quirks that make sense, because when you're looking at the story in its context within within your head, suddenly get pulled out of the context that you know, and someone who doesn't have that context will go, wait, that doesn't make any sense at all. Why Applejack has oranges instead of apples on her
Alright,
blanket?
Pinstripe, you actually brought up somewhat good analogy. So, if like trying to introduce someone to the story is like trying to introduce children to your house, would it be safe to say, like meeting someone for the first time is a lot like how you would meet an OC for the first time, just to kind of represent back to OCs?
Yeah, I could say that. It's like, generally the progression you go through is about the same. It's generally the writer will talk maybe a little bit about what the character's doing or what they look like, and it's kind of like pulling back the layers. It's like you meet someone, you say, hi, how are you? And then you start talking, and then you find out where they work and how many kids they have, how their week's been.
And that's how you definitely build on a good character, but like if someone wanted to do that very good first impression, they'd have to do something to stand out. What would you say those things to stand out would have to be? To make somebody want to come and meet them, you know?
Generally, the thing that will make someone want to come and meet your OC isn't something that isn't just the OC. It's what is it's because that's the whole concept of the story hook. It isn't just making someone want to come and meet the OC. It's making someone coming to want and see this world you're writing and want to come and see this plot that's going to unfold. It's the hook of the story, and it relies on a number of aspects of what did this person find? What did they do? Suddenly you're thrown into this awesome battle scene, and you're going to find out in a bit why it's like this and all that stuff.
Yeah, that right there, that is the most important part. What you just said. Way too many people, when they start out and they're doing their first OC for the first time, they're trying something new, they feel the need to tell their reader all the stuff about their character to try and just convince them that their character is a viable character. You don't want to do that. You definitely don't want to do that.
Actually, here's a good analogy, I guess, to follow up with what you're saying there, Laichonious. The character should be like a tour guide if someone's showing you through a factory or something like that you're wanting to check out. And you're learning things about this tour guide as you go.
Yeah, that could be one way to look at it.
I'm trying to wrap my head around that one a little bit.
Well, like the character is the person who's telling us of the story that's happening and the things that are going on.
Okay.
So they basically are the tour guide in a sense.
Or they are at the very least the guy you're stalking as he's trying to work in this metaphorical story factory. It's like, we're watching you. You don't know we are. Limited omniscience, but we are watching you.
Yeah, that's a good point, though. When you have a character who's doing the telling or who's doing the doing and you're showing them doing that, show not tell, you can see the world colored through their personality, and that helps your reader connect with them emotionally, and that's what you want. you want an emotional investment. So you have to make them likable. You have to make them personable, at least a little bit. I mean, they can be massive jerks, but they need to have something that makes you want to know more about them. And that's 100% of the time going to be the circumstances that they're in when you meet them for the first time.
And that extends beyond just the main character OC. It's like if you have this other character that is going to be critical for the plot, you're going to have to want to make it so not only does your character plot-wise want to go talk to this person, but the reader also wants to go talk to this jock footballer who just solved a string theory problem in 2 seconds. It's like, huh?
Yeah.
Alright, so we definitely have a pretty fair idea on how to get a reader's interest in a character, because we're going to a story because we want to know about the story itself, and then we're gradually learning about our main character as we go. They're not the main focus, would you guys say, of the story, unless...
It's all parts that come together to make the greater whole. It's like if someone comes in to enjoy the story. Part of the story is the plot, part of the story is the characters, part of the story is the setting. Oh my god, that's kind of turning into a tongue twister. But it's kind of like someone isn't coming just for one thing. They're coming for the whole package, and they expect the whole package to kind of be polished. It's like, great character, great setting, the plot kind of sucks. Story sucks. Sucks
Yeah, one can't work
great.
without the other, right?
What?
Like one thing can't work without the other, right?
Weakest link in the chain, all those grand metaphors, yeah.
Okay. Well, those are some definitely very good points. I especially like how you guys were saying where you definitely want to have situations, if you have like your tragic characters, you have bad situations that they're in, because that is something I definitely use in my own story, is he's in a bad situation, the world is bad, things go bad in this world all the time, so of course he's not going to have a positive outlook on life. And I think that's definitely what made him work for me, I suppose. That's just my particular case. I don't know about you guys and your own stories.
There's a lot of logic that goes into it, like you just said. I mean, their situation, especially their initial situation, is going to weigh pretty heavily on their outlook on life. And it needs to be something that your reader can actually see.
Like characters will be far different if to kind of put them on a timeline. Let's say there's a grand civil war on the timeline that leaves the world of the setting completely ransacked. A character who lived and was born before the conflict but died around the time the Civil War was starting to start is going to have a vastly different personality or opinion of the world than someone who was born and lived during the whole conflict, and someone who was born after and is dealing with the consequences of the conflict.
Very good points. Okay, so we definitely talked about how to create a good OC, like how to give them layers and so on, and how to make them interesting, how to make self-inserts not, what's the nice word I'm looking for here? I don't think I can actually find the nice word, but not stereotypical. Let's just go with that, since we're beating that dead horse to death. So, now that we have an idea on making the structure of an OC, let's talk about how to make them good in certain roles. So, what makes a good support OC, or maybe even a background OC?
It's kind of probably the same rules that apply to someone in a stage show. Is if you're a background character or a secondary character, you don't want to steal the limelight from unnecessary amounts of the limelight from the main cast. Otherwise, it's like it's like, okay, that character's fine, but I'd rather hear about this one. It's like, can we have the story about this one? No. Aw. I want to know about that one. No.
And what about support? What actually supporting the main role? What's a good way to come up with that?
It's fairly situational based, I'd say. If anyone's free to say I'm dead wrong, but it's like I made this reference earlier. It's like you have this OC who's just there to deliver a drink. It's like you can give them. It's like honestly, you don't even need to just say more than the bartender gave them a drink, unless you can just let the reader themselves figure out. Okay, what does that bartender look like? Okay, that makes sense to me.
But this is like, well, that's keeps background characters anyway. But
yeah, but if it's like a support character who's going to be around a few times, it's like then you can start to give them personality quirks, things that are related to the plot. But at the same time, it's like you never want to lay out, I think, everything about a support character unless it becomes critical to the plot, because then why aren't they the main character if you're going to be exploring them to such depths?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I mean, there's a fine line, and it's different for every story. And at some point, you have to, when you're making these characters or taking your characters to places and having them interact with other characters in your world, you need to decide at some point where you're going to draw that line. The easiest way I think you can do that is for all the other temporary characters or support characters, they're going to have something situational that is going to hold them where they currently are, so they don't join the adventure. And then it doesn't become a temptation to explain them.
Alright, so if I may use that tour guide example again, let's just say they were the co-workers in the factory explaining a certain bit of how something works when the tour guide comes to them.
Yeah, to continue that metaphor, that is a good way to put it. It's like revealing something about the main character is a way of tinting the whole story into a particular light and making it seem like you're really riding along with the main character through the plot line. Revelations of character aspects for the side characters aren't really there, in my opinion, to kind of tint the world, because those reactions are still going to be processed or commented on by the main character or the narrator. It's because the side characters' revelations about their character or their history all really kind of come to serve the plot or the main character. They either reveal something about the plot that the main character can then use or needed to find out about, or gives them greater insight into what's going on, or they they act as a mirror to reveal something about the main character. To actually make a reference to this in Fallout Equestria, I forget his name, but one of the characters Little Pip meets is a stallion who runs a cheese emporium or something in one of the towns, and he is so brutally honest that he willingly turned himself in for something. Oh darn, I'm forgetting that aspect of the story very hard. But then it's like that becomes a definition of his character, and that's all well and good, but it all comes circling around to as a definition or something that Little Pip herself kept looking back on as something as a means of judging her own character.
You definitely brought up something interesting, and it's a point that Hingard had once made to me. It's in the last episode, I think you mentioned it. Kurt Vonnegut, I think his name is. One of his points here, I'm actually having to read a list here, but every sentence must do one of two things: reveal the character or advance the action. And I think that can definitely apply to support characters. They have to do those two things. One of those two things, at least. If not both. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that sounds about right, I'd say.
Alright. Now, how do we form the tour guide? How do we make the tour guide interesting? Why do we want to follow him? What's good at making us want to follow him and so on? And not to mention listen to him. What?
That's what it is. You can't tell people what's going on. You have to show them, and it has to be happening.
It's like
that's what makes a tour guide worth following, I think.
Yeah, no, it's like a tour guide it's like a tour guide is there to kind of show you the cool thing you want to see. Like, you went to see how cars are made. Well, the tour guide's showing you around the factory, and the factory is immensely more interesting if all the little robotic arms are going around and doing their things, and you can actually like follow a car from one end of the factory to the other until it's complete. It's like just having a tour guide that shows you pictures like, and this here is where we do this, and this is why it is interesting. Is like, nah, just show, but we want to see the cool robots.
Yeah, you can't have the spotlight stolen by the setting either. You need to find that balance. There's a lot of balance in all of this. Lots of planning.
So make that tour guide do interesting things, say interesting things, and let us relate to this tour guide so we'll want to listen to him.
Yeah.
Alright. Cool that you've been awful quiet. Do you have anything you want to be saying on these?
Nope, you guys are sewing it up pretty good.
I'd say Penstroke is stealing the show. Mm-hmm.
Competition.
And we're the support roles here. Mm-hmm. Alright, now I guess here's another tricky one. How do you best make OCs interact with MLP characters?
Don't make them do it unless it's actually essential to the plot.
Don't do it just for fan service.
Yes,
Yeah, it's
underscore
like, let's
that
all
40
meet the
billion
main
times.
six, even though for the rest of this adventure we only care about Fluttershy. It's like, no, just meet Fluttershy, and if other characters happen to walk by, good for them. That actually reminds me of the Iron Will episode. Is that it was all about Fluttershy, and truthfully they could have had everybody else kind of going along for the ride, but it was much more concise adventure just because of the fact that only Rarity and Pinkie Pie were dealing.
And Bobby BronyWriter a whole hour and 15 minutes late.
Sorry, I had a job interview at Boston Market that got me. That's gonna hopefully give me the BronyCon, so.
Excellent.
I love their meatloaf. It's delicious.
I don't do Boston Market. Alright, BronyWriter, I'm assuming you've been listening in on this particular subject, so before we move on to the next thing, or we let someone else talk about how OCs interact with MLP characters, do you have anything you would like to add to advice for OCs?
Well, I think that developing relationships is important. So if a character does say meet Pinkie Pie, they shouldn't be bestest friends right away, even though that's very much part of Pinkie Pie's character.
It's like Pinkie Pie might think you're bestest friends, but it's going to be a very rare kind of OC character that's going to reciprocate that best friendness.
Yeah,
right off
that's exactly it. That's exactly it. So yeah, it's very important that relationships develop in a realistic manner. I don't know if any of you have read my Not a Brony story, but that's basically what I base most of this off of, because that's my big OC character, who's TD. Yeah, Pinkie was pleased to meet TD, but he was put off by her, and their relationship went through a strain when he broke a Pinkie promise. And I think we all know from the show that
That's a very bad thing to do.
she was not pleased, so she set him on fire.
Oh, Pinkie.
It was fake fire, and it was just to scare him. But yep, no, that's totally.
How is it fake fire? I want to hear this explanation behind fake fire.
It was just
And that's how you make interesting interactions between main six and OCs. You put them on fire.
yeah. Oh, yeah, fire solves everything.
Fire.
That's what I call trial by fire.
Yeah, but it didn't hurt him, and the relationship developed. They had to rebuild trust on both ends. Pinkie Pie was happy to see him in the beginning, but when their relationship went through a strain, they had to rebuild trust on both ends. So, yeah, and
I think
they went through some things and developed like people. It felt like a very real developed relationship. So if an OC is going to interact with the main six, it can be instantaneous. They're all bestest buddies because, I mean, you know,
If I may throw a bit in here, it can't be like you're going, this character's going in here and like they're meeting a celebrity or something. They're going in there as if they were meeting some other person, like just some other random individual off the street. Is how people should be.
That's story specifically about how the main six have become celebrities for saving Equestria a few times.
Well, TD knows who all of the main six are because he had the show on Earth, but he doesn't care for any of them at the beginning because he's not a brony. So technically it's a celebrity kind of thing because it happens after the events of at least season 2. So he knows what they've done. But for him it's more like meeting news.
But I think one of my points is it should not be a huge major deal when this happens. Unless it is relevant to the core plot.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Like if it's an OC story about a ambitious fashion model wanting to go and find and get lessons from the famous short-lived model Fluttershy, then a little bit of idol worship would do wonders, I think.
Anyone else here seen the movie All About Eve?
I don't think so.
Very much like that. It would actually be an interesting fan fiction idea. This is a touch off topic, but it's basically about this fan who meets this huge movie star, and she totally takes over her life and her fame. So for OC to do that with Rarity, I think it'd be interesting. Although I have seen a few things like that.
I think what's important, though, BronyWriter, what you were saying, is if you do have that, like say it's pertinent to the plot, and you do have that, it has to take time, and that deals a lot with pacing. You know,
Yeah.
you have to be able to pace the relationships to develop them properly.
Yeah.
Like think about in real life. You meet a new person. You don't become friends the second you meet, unless they did something interesting and you did something interesting, and you both just kind of click that way. But nobody really becomes best friends right out of the gate, right?
Especially
Yeah,
not
it
with
doesn't happen very often.
especially not different species. If you have a human OC, brony or not, you're not going to become best friends with the main six because you can't relate to them culturally very much. So
If the fact not being a culture shock isn't enough.
yeah, so when ponies do something that's not human culture, and the best pony stories do, because it's a whole different universe, world, whatever, it's important that you try to find ways to mesh their cultures in a way that feels natural. Does that make sense? The human can't fit into the pony world right away, even if he is intricately familiar with the show, just because there are differences. Like if I eat meat, if I went to Equestrian, I'm like, oh yeah, I'd like a hamburger. You mean a cow? Yeah. Oh, that doesn't work so well, and that's gonna. I don't know if it would put strain on a relationship, but it would certainly.
It would certainly make someone go, oh, I don't want to be here anymore.
Well, at the very least, it would highlight the differences for both sides. That the main six would go, okay, this carnivorous being.
Let's not even get started on horse meat.
Yeah.
This also reminds me of I think a CG Mad Max comment about the Equestria Girls movie and Twilight falling in love with bacon while she's in the human world and then finding out what it's made of.
Does she do that? I haven't seen the movie yet.
No, it's not in the that's not in the movie. It's some comic it's like if they did that in the movie, that wouldn't be family friendly.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah. Kind of like in Anthropology, where Lyra, human, eats at McDonald's, and she's like, "Oh, this was amazing. What was it?" Well, it was meat. Oh, she flips out, but then in the back of her mind, it goes, "Meat was delicious."
And ensue the resulting cannibalistic gore fic.
I'm not gonna touch cupcakes, all right?
No, they're not touching cupcakes. That story virtually has no plot. Let's leave it at that.
I have a soft spot for it, but you're right. It's just dumb.
Why don't we roll on to the next item on the list?
And that actually is how to write a interesting plot using OCs or only OCs. But I think it's safe to say, in terms of importance, like priority importance, character and story are kind of tied, almost. in the priority list?
Definitely, just because you need both to be good in equal measure for a story to really work. I mean, it's like there's always going to be cases where it's like this is more character form focused and this is more plot focused, but at the same time, both are on the same level of quality, even if there's one in greater measure than the other.
So, I think it's safe to say the first thing you want to establish is what is the core focus of your plot. Is it your characters, or is it the situation that they're in? Is that the first thing you'd say that people need to figure out when they're starting this out?
I think that all depends on someone's inspiration. It's like you'll have an idea for a story usually before you start a story. It isn't usually you sit down and it's like, I am going to write a story. What should it be about? It's like generally when you're going to actually have a good story, you generally have already thought of the idea when you go to sit down about it. And generally when you have the idea already, that tunes you more towards, do I need to figure out the characters first, or do I need to figure out the plot first? And any disagreements?
No, and I'm trying to think of if I do have any objections to that kind of idea based on my own experiences or movies I've seen in. Yeah, it really just all depends on what's more interesting. I mean, like, I'm trying to think of an example.
Well, I do kind of take issue with that just a little bit. I mean, it's pretty close to what I generally follow. You're going to have an idea for a situation first, and then the characters sometimes come along, or you're going to have the characters first, and then you have to come up with the situation. But what ultimately ends up being a better story is when you have a developed character, or a character that's solid at the beginning, and then the adventure kind of takes shape around them, and it becomes character driven. It's not so much the idea that is driving the character, it's the character that is taking over the idea and moving the story.
Well,
those end up
that's almost arguing semantics, because it's like that's one reason why I kind of disagree with some of like the official writing guides and whatnots that are online. It's like you have to plan everything out to every detail right away. It's like,
oh, good grief, no.
That makes writing so boring. It's like like part of the reason I like writing is because of the fact that I get to watch them. It's like I get to watch the movie at the same time everyone else does, and I don't always know what's going to happen. I know the general path. It's like it's like we
Sometimes
are going
you
to have
know that.
It's like you may know at some point the world may blow up, or that it's like we're trying to stop the world from blowing up. How that's going to happen? No idea.
Yeah,
oh,
it's just easier to do that. It's easier to be more organic when you have the character, especially the main character, first, I think.
Hey guys, I kind of got to get off now, so
yeah, we're kind of running at an hour and a half for something that would be maxed at an hour.
Penstroke, I thought this was going to be like I had one episode where we had an hour, but we ended up clocking it at about 2 hours and 45 minutes once, and that was when I had the analysis guys on the show.
that was
It's just lies. You were lying to me earlier.
Well, I told you we don't know how things usually go. They just go up their own way, so.
Misty always lies.
But you're having fun, isn't that the important thing?
Maybe, if I don't get whipped for it.
Alright, you're gonna get lashings for leaving, Quillbit. I'm sorry, but that's just how it goes.
Lashings.
Lashings. Alright, I guess that's Quillbit's exit stage left cue.
Yep.
Let's see, Quillbit.
Alright, bye-bye.
Alright,
TTFN.
See ya.
Alright, so we're talking about plot TOCs. Anything else you guys want to bring up on that?
Well, if I had to have an analogy in terms of just characters and all of that and plot, in terms of like development of all of that, if I had to have an analogy, I don't know if any of you have seen Monty Python's Meaning of Life, but there's this little sketch where Eric Idle like points at the camera and goes, "Do you want to know the meaning of life? Come on, this way, follow me this way," and he just does that for a couple minutes. And I think stories develop very much the same way. You just have it's kind of like almost pushing a rock down a hill. It's like, oh, that's where it went. Oh, interesting. Like my character of TD, the kicker line for that whole story that got it going. I was sitting in jury duty one day, and I'm like, what would happen if a totally sarcastic non-brony came to Equestria? How would they interact? And the first line of dialogue, or not dialogue, but the first line that I thought of for the story was, with all of the quiet dignity and grace that I could muster, I walked up to Princess Celestia and punched her in the face. And that was the whole thing that got it going. That is the only thing I had planned. I'm like, all right, let's do this thing.
It's like, that makes this whole thing worth it if I can write the scene where Celestia gets punched in the face.
Absolutely. And now there are, and I thought, okay, it's just going to be some dumb little 10-chapter thing. There are now, I think, 5 maybe different stories in that universe. One currently ongoing where that character is traveling all over Equestria. He's about to get in a death match with a Minotaur twice his size. You never know where a thing like that goes, and all just because he punched Celestia in the face. All of that happened. So it is important to have some base character. I knew that TD would be sarcastic. I knew he wouldn't be a brony, and I knew at some point that he would punch Celestia in the face. That would be the line that would close out the first chapter, and that's all I knew.
And then that becomes kind of the thing of like, you should never abide by any real rules when that so strictly that you're trying to limit yourself when writing a story, just because it's like a trellis for a plant. It's like, it's the rules, the ideas, the concepts, like we're even mentioning here, are good guides to kind of help you keep yourself on track and keep your story going towards its hopefully good end. But you shouldn't adhere to them so strictly that you're stifling your creativity.
And there are...
Since you mentioned that, Penstroke, I just got to say this. I have this very handy little book that I mentioned last week. It's called the No Experience Necessary Writer's Course, a unique stress-free approach for anyone who's ever wanted to write. And one of the very first things it tells you is basically forget everything they taught you in school.
Yeah.
And that definitely falls in line with what you were saying, Penstroke, is that's a good way to come up with inspiration, is don't try to figure out how to make the story go on the plot graph, and other silly nonsense like that. Just do what comes to you. And
don't force it, basically.
And it's like, and don't be afraid. And I would say it's like, especially if you're experimenting with a character or an idea, it's like some people would argue you always want to finish every story you start.
Oh.
But it's like I saw someone comment on that. It's like, my opinion is, you want to finish every story you start in earnest, but you shouldn't be afraid to fiddle. It's like, go into this little like, okay, it's like sketching for an artist. It's like, not every sketch an artist does is going to turn into a full picture, or is the picture's not always going to end up looking like the sketch, but sketching in itself can be fun. I happened to trip over and rewatch the 2 Short Circuit movies. It's like, I want to have fun with this, and so I literally wrote a few paragraphs, like, just like, could I put Johnny Five in the world of Equestrian? And it's like, I had some antagonists and I had ideas. It didn't end up working out, but it was a fun idea to think about.
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes you just gotta you gotta know when you've, how am I gonna put this? You gotta know when something's like too much. You gotta realize when you've made mistakes and fix them. So, my latest big story, Princess Celestia gets mugged. She gets mugged and kidnapped by 6 kidnappers, and I realized 6 is probably too many. 6 is too many personalities to keep track of. And that's also something very important with a story with OCs. If you have more than 1 or 2, how are you going to make them all different to keep track of them all? So I completely wrote 2 OCs out of the story. So
probably a couple of them have been marginalized even further, just so that, like, one's a grunting Minotaur or some other sort.
Something.
Alright, so to kind of move on, and I think we got a good idea that you want to have a plot to go with the characters in order to make the story interesting, and I still think it's a good idea. You want to figure out right away if you want to talk more about the plot or if you want to talk more about the character when you're first figuring this out to really establish who your OC is and how important he's going to be in the grand scheme of things.
Whether or not he's an instigator or just an unfortunate victim to the happenings going on.
Exactly. All right. Now, something I think definitely Pinstruck has a very diverse opinion on. The next thing I'd like to talk about is tips on making an NLP character in OC. The whole interpretation thing we were talking about earlier. Take a character with a little more personality or screen time and make them your own, like Derpy or Doing Do, or by changing a character completely according to the situation, like, I don't know, Chrysalis decides not to be a bad guy anymore. I don't know. Somebody's goody two-shoes.
Generally, what I'm going to say onto that regard is you need to have an umbrella idea, a linchpin reason why this particular change has occurred, and you have to take into account how that one linchpin idea changes the rest of the world. It's kind of it goes back to a metaphor that Silver Quill told me last year at Everfree Northwest, and I use it all the time in these kind of things. Is the idea of juggling a ball is that you, especially in fan fiction, if you're deviating from the main plot, you generally don't want to make the player juggle too many ideas of why this world is different. If you can tie everything back to a single idea, that's like juggling one ball. Almost everyone can juggle one ball, and so most everyone can handle a story where it's a vastly different world, but it's a vastly different world for one particular reason, and we can always relate all the changes back to one particular reason. Or if you're getting more complex, you can usually get away with 2, maybe 3, but it's like with juggling balls. As you add more balls, you quickly start excluding more and more people who just can't follow what you're doing or replicate it in their own mind. And so, like, for the examples you gave, like Chrysalis wants to be good, why does she want to be good? And if it's one particular reason, like her hive got wiped out or something, or she's trying to be good so that she can actually backstab everyone later or something, it's like, or if it's something environmental, like suddenly there's a greater evil that the changelings and the ponies must fight together, then use that one linchpin idea and make sure to not only try to tie everything back to it, but try to realize that that linchpin idea can have a sweeping effect on other things in the story.
Yeah, and it also depends very much on how much of an OC you want to turn a main character into. So, like, to use an example, in one of my stories, arguably my only good one, I turned Rarity into a serial killer, but I changed almost nothing else. Meanwhile, you have stories like Cheerly's Garden. It's Cheerly, but I think that particular Cheerly is an OC, because the only thing that we can equate to that Cheerly and the real Cheerly is the job and the looks. I've read Cheerly's Garden, I think, once or twice, and it's not Cheerly, it's an OC. So it's a fine line, I think, with OCs. Adding a personality trait or two that change the character in a direction, but you can still recognize them as that character, or changing it so much that it's like, okay, if you're going to change Twilight so much, just don't make her Twilight. Have it somebody else.
Yeah. This reminds me of a comic done by someone where they just basically added a trait to Rarity where she does archery for hobby or something. Mm-hmm. And it's like you can still tell it's very much Rarity, because as she's shooting these arrows, she's shooting at a very far off target, but she's doing it very accurately, so that she's like doing that trick where you hit the arrow you launched before and you keep splitting them. Mm-hmm. But then as the final touch, when she launched the final arrow, she had like a rose or something attached to it, and it unfurled because of the force of the impact. And then she did her wah, and then drank wine because she was happy. She's like triumphed, but it's like the skill of it was giving her the skill or the idea of enjoying that hobby, but it's still like it was completely her still. Yes.
So what
It's
about...
definitely easier to add than to take away.
Yes, definitely. That is very true.
Yeah.
And I guess that's something that can definitely be applied to the characters who have no character. Like I said, Derpy, Daring Do, any of the background characters, and taking your own spin on them.
Well, I think the show does give us little bits and pieces to work with, and it's important to latch onto those bits. So if you made Daring Do more like Short Round instead of the Indiana Jones homage that she is, people would look at that and go, that's not Daring Do. Daring Do charges into situations with her head held high and a smirk on her face.
And she's reckless. Let's not forget reckless.
Yeah, it was reckless. What is she doing? Going, okay, now let's map out this whole thing, and hopefully we can be back in time for dinner. I'm making crumpets and tea. People would look at that and go, that's not Daring Do. Daring Do is reckless, go-getter kind of mare. What's this?
You promised me chocolate. You gave me vanilla. What is wrong with you?
Exactly. So I mean, it's very important to with characters like Lyra and Bon Bon. There's obviously Fanon, and Fanon is obviously just, you can throw that away if you want.
I guess Final Scratch and Octavia are better examples, because those are definitely something with major sticks to them.
Yeah, I mean, Fanon oftentimes is just interlocked, and that does make it tougher. So if it's if you want to make Lyra and Bon Bon dating somebody else and they can't stand each other and they get into fights all the time, I think most readers are going to look at that and go, okay, I know you want to try something new, but my headcanon is that while Bon Bon can be exasperated by what Lyra's doing, they're lovers, if not best friends.
I think the best way, for that particular concept, then you want to roll it as a comedy, just because if you're going to that much lengths to go against fandom, then generally you're doing it to stick it to someone, and the best way to stick it to someone and still make them enjoy it is to make them laugh. It's that's what comedy, part of comedy is about, is pointing out the things that people do that are stupid, but having a laugh at it with them about it.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure I've seen some derpy fics where it's oh wait, she's actually smarter than anyone else in Ponyville. I want to say that I have.
Definitely in my Better Living story, the first crossover I did, she was smarter than she let on, but she had a medical thing that made it difficult for her to speak, and so that was the reason why people thought she was dumb.
Yeah, kind of like how everyone thinks that Pinkie Pie's on drugs because of her hyper-personality, but not so much.
I think you touched on something really important there. It's in terms of character development. The things that characters do always have a reason. They never do something absolutely arbitrary. So even though in your other story, Derpy was smarter than what was readily apparent, there was a reason why she had a stigma around her.
If I may briefly follow up on that, the Kurt Vonnegut thing I brought up earlier, he's got another quote for that. Every character should want something, even if it's only a glass of water. Just thought I'd follow you up what you're saying there, because that's a very great point.
Yeah, I mean, my girlfriend said this to me. I'm not sure where she got the quote, but bad guys don't wake up in the morning and go, you know what? Today I'm gonna be a bad guy. They have a legitimate reason. I was also at the end of one of the comments on the Secret Life of Rarity. Somebody posted an interview with Bryan Cranston from Breaking Bad, and he said something very similar. It's what Walter White is doing is bad.
But he has a very good reason for doing it.
Drugs, and he's selling crack, but he didn't wake up one morning and go, I'm gonna make drugs and sell meth to people and get involved in this underworld. He did it because he's I'm trying to support my family here.
And he's gonna die, and he's not gonna leave much
I'm going to
behind.
die, and I need to support my family and pay for the treatments. He didn't wake up and go, I'm going to sell meth today. He had a reason behind it. And characters should be very much the same way.
And like Pinstripe was
Which
saying,
is actually probably some of the reason why people kind of felt a little disappointed with Sombra.
Oh,
He came off as the guy who just wanted to be evil one day.
He was just evil to be evil. He was there to fill the role and nothing really else.
he wanted crystal slaves.
Sombra is one of the biggest missed opportunities in the entire series. To me, if I was in control, the first 2 episodes of season 3 would be almost exclusively about Sombra, and this is getting off track, but and the Crystal Fair would be a smaller part of that story, them trying to stop Sombra, and Sombra plays a more active role. It'd be like in the Discord episodes if, I don't know, the main 6 was trying to set up another grand galloping gallop, but Discord was still trying to stop them, but Discord only had like 2 minutes of screen time. Well, that's boring.
Actually, BronyWriter, since you are going into this track, we are we are actually kind of bringing this back. We're talking about taking a character who has no screen time, in this case Sombra, and we know he's just kind of heartlessly evil and he wants crystal slaves and all, but you bring up a very good point that all of you kind of did in combination. He needs to have a reason for doing things, and that's one thing people can do. They have the option to give him a reason to do things, and I guess that's what can make him kind of their own, is the reason why he's a bad guy, and yeah, I'm trying to follow this up with something, but my brain's crapping out.
Sombra can be a dream character for fan fiction writers because they can go almost anywhere with him, but for fans of the show itself, it's like he's a boring, bland character. A better example, like a stronger character on both fronts, would be Chrysalis, because it's like she has so much air of mystery around her that a fan fiction writer can go absolutely nuts with that and do whatever the heck he or she wants, but she still has a strong enough character in the show itself and motivation that she's interesting for the people who watch the show as well.
So
Motivation.
yeah, going back to what Pinstripe said early on, if you're going to give them a type of character change of some sort, or you're trying to make them kind of your own sort of character in a way, they have to have a reason for why they're like that.
Yeah.
Alright, so I believe definitely also covers the next point I was going to mention, is how to avoid these characters from becoming shallow cameos. And I think that's simply the taking away of things.
Well, I think it's, not sure how well this fits and everything, but to me, the mark of a good character, and anybody familiar with Plinkett's Red Letter reviews, or Plinkett's Red Letter Media reviews of the Star Wars prequels, and if you're not familiar, they're brilliant, wonderful, but he said something in the review that has always stuck with me when it comes to writing OCs. And it's a good, and I've even given a couple other people this challenge, describe the character without saying what they look like, what kind of costume they roll, what role or profession they played in the movie, or their relationship. Describe them to me like I've never even heard of this universe. So if you're taking away character traits that would allow you to do that, well then that's a problem. So I mean, otherwise the character's boring. If it's just a pointless cameo, you might as well not have him in the story. And that's a mistake I made. I've made that mistake before, where I've had, the main 6 pop up for a quick laugh at the very end of the story, but people have told me, well, what's the point? Right, you know what? There is no point. Just throw him out there again. Just, the story was plenty fine without that one last little, it's kind of cute, I guess.
So what do you guys have to say about maybe other shallow cameo-related things that they want to avoid?
Well, actually, I think it would be important, since we were already talking about villains and why we were so disappointed with Sombra. A lot of times, antagonists in these stories end up being OCs, and you can do exactly the same thing we've been talking about for a protagonist or an antagonist. You just have to flip it around. They need to have a motivation. They need to have an actual personality to work off of. And then you need to give your reader the context of why they're doing what they're doing, and it has to hold water. Otherwise, the plot starts to fall apart. And it's kind of... Those first episodes of Season 3 were good. I mean, I liked them. I enjoyed watching it. But it didn't feel as tight as the wedding episodes because Sombra was so non-existent. I mean, you just didn't really know what was exactly the point. What were we really learning here? I mean, we learned a lesson with Twilight, but it wasn't as powerful as it could have been.
Yeah, it felt very shoehorned in my opinion, but that's a whole other topic.
Yeah.
I think also something very important when you're kind of veering towards that point, this cameo thing, or even something so far as making a character Mary Stu or Gary Stu, when your readers... we have an advantage as fan fiction writers posting chapter by chapter because readers can give feedback. I know some of my stories wouldn't have been as good if readers hadn't gone, well, that's kind of dumb. Or even just, I think it's going here. Readers have had better ideas than I have sometimes, but it's important when your reader says that your OC is either becoming a Gary Stu or a Mary Stu, or a character of yours who started out strong is becoming a pointless cameo by this point, shallow and uninteresting. Listen to them about that and adjust accordingly. I mean, there's nothing wrong with going back and rewriting major sections.
Though some will demonize you for it, especially if they thought the original version was just fine.
I've had that before, too.
I speak of Chapter 10 in past sins of posting. It's like, that one's been a kind of a black sheep.
Chapter 7 of Princess Celestia Gets Mugged, I totally deleted it because I'm like, wait a minute, this isn't like intelligent humor anymore. It's farcical, epic humor kind of crap, and I totally deleted like 2 chapters and rewrote them so that not even a hint was there anymore. So...
Yeah, I did a very similar thing myself. I know exactly how it feels.
Yeah, and I mean, it does kind of feel a little bad because you're like, for those people who do enjoy those chapters, it's like, I'm disappointing them, but on the other hand, it's like, well...
We're writing a better story, screw what they think.
Yeah, and it's also kind of disappointing because it's like, I did put work into those 2 chapters, even if it's just a couple hours that I banged out, I put work into them. Having said that, I learned from that. I learned from deleting those 2 chapters, so if you excuse me, dear Princess Celestia.
I'm gonna get punched in the face.
Yeah. Twice, actually, he does that. He does it twice. And he shoots her in the head. Doesn't hurt her anytime. But that's off topic.
It is. Alright, I think we probably covered just about all of the major points about how to write good OCs. And I think we're going to go ahead and start getting to the wrap-up point of the episode. So, do you guys have any other useful tips in writing OCs?
Make them relatable. Somebody may have already said that. I came in an hour in, which hurts, but it's if an OC is going to be a protagonist or even a hero or antagonist, anything like that. If he's a major part of your story, make it so that we can recognize the emotions that he or she is going through as legitimate. We've all felt pretty much every emotion on the spectrum, so just villains like...
That you can sympathize or empathize with, right?
Yeah. I mean, a flat, one-dimensional character like Sombra is nowhere near as interesting as a character like Nightmare Moon. Yes, she's evil and all of that, but even Discord, who doesn't have the tragic backstory that we're aware of, we're aware that he's just kind of messing around because it's fun for him. We can relate to that because we've all had that moment where it's like, I'm just going to do whatever the heck I want this time because it's fun. We can understand that. Precisely. So if you're going to write a character with emotions, and you have to do that, otherwise the character's boring, and if the character's boring...
And they're a cardboard cutout.
Yeah. So if you're going to write a character, give them emotions that we can sympathize or empathize with.
Yeah, that's definitely a point worth hitting again. We did say make them relatable, but
I'm sorry.
empathizing and sympathizing is about, I would say, 70% of what makes a story really good, especially for a reader. Because what I've said many times to many people, whether tutoring or otherwise, when your writing is not stagnant. When you write it down, it's not in stone, really. It's more of a conversation between the author and the reader. You want to connect to them, and you can do that actively. It's not a passive process, and that's what makes good stories great. They become something more than just the words on the page. They start becoming connected to emotions and thoughts and ideas, and then you start getting people into your world, and then they're immersed, and then they follow along, because it's like living another life. The more stories I've read, the more really good books that I've seen, I take pieces of that away with me, and that's my ultimate goal when I make a character. I want to make a character that is relatable enough that my reader can put themselves in their shoes, maybe, at least a little bit, and then when they get to the end of the story, they have something to show for all the time that they've spent reading what I've written.
You want to make an impact with your characters, and that's the best way to make an impact. I mean, just with anything, like any type of genre, the excitement or the tragedy or the comedy comes from us either caring or relating to the characters. If you don't have that, there's no story.
That is definitely true. Actually, before I say I'll say it now. I do have 2 more tips I do want to provide. Both come from source materials that have definitely helped me in my own writing. Another Kurt Vonnegut, one of his steps to 8 Basics of Creating Writing. One of his other steps is be a sadist. No matter how sweet and innocent your leading characters, make awful things happen to them in order that the reader that may see what they are made of. And I believe that's a good way to definitely help come up with your plot and come up with your character and how they would react to situations. And this is definitely a good way to help form who your character is and how the plot would unfold. And the second thing I do want to share is from the writer's course book I mentioned again, and this is another set of words I kind of live by and have practiced myself. Pardon me if it sounds strange, but it is effective. One thing you should totally do is basically sit down and talk to your characters, so to speak. There's a whole chapter on this. It's great. But sit in the chair, pull up another chair in front of you, and pretend your character that you're creating is sitting there in front of you, and you're asking them what would they do in this situation? What would they say if asked this question? What would they do? How would they act? And at times, maybe you could just stand in the middle of a room you're in, and you imagine the scene that you're writing unfolding right in this room you're standing in. You're watching the characters talk with one another. Maybe you're even speaking their parts. But this, I believe, is a very effective way to get to know your characters and give them depth and see how they would really be. They have to live in your mind in order to become a real character. And role-playing, by the way, is just one of those great wonders that teach you how to come up with good characters. But that's just my 2 bits there in the tips department. Pinstrip, do you have anything you want to add?
Well, actually, on the topic of RP, is like something that just to help in general is to always try to keep writing, and so like just being willing to just have fun and be silly with something to sketch like an artist would just with your written words is never a bad thing, just because it keeps your writing skills sharp, it keeps your form sharp, and it lets you just to have fun, because that's the one thing that's the one thing I see some people do with fan fiction is they start to take it too seriously. They start to treat it like a job. It's like, you're not going to make a living off of fan fiction unless I'm completely ignorant to some singular exception to the rule. And in that case, the exception helps define the rule, because it's like, yeah, you see that? That was the one time lightning's going to strike like that, not going to happen again. But so have fun with it.
Well, 50 Shades of Grey turned out it was originally a piece of Twilight fan fiction.
Yeah, but then there's the situation of not everyone likes that, but not everyone likes everything. But at the same time, it's like it started off like that, but as I recall, it's not actually related to the story now that it's published. It's like they ganked out the official characters and replaced them with what I can imagine are similar.
Oh yeah, she just changed the names as far as I'm aware.
Well then,
Yep.
Then while in its heart it is still fan fiction, it is in content viable enough by legal law to consider original work.
But it's fan fiction.
Yeah. It's fan fiction you can get by with legally, it would seem. But it's...
Yep.
Definitely gotta have fun when you're doing it.
Have fun making the characters and making them go through horrible things.
Or like with BronyWriter's situation, enjoy leading up to the situation where you're going to get that payoff of, I just punched Celeste in the nose.
Oh yeah. What's going to happen next? Nobody knows.
Yeah,
But
but I
hey.
ended the chapter on that and didn't post the next one for another couple of days, I think, so... I let him squirm. What's gonna happen? I don't know.
Well, that's one way to have fun with it. Leave your readers in suspense. It's definitely one way to do it. The trolls. Alright, any last tips you guys want to provide?
I really agree with your be sadistic thing. Not only because that can occasionally be fun, but readers go, if they're really emotionally involved, readers really like that kind of thing. And I love writing that kind of thing, but I think I had something that just got away from me. Otherwise I wouldn't have started speaking, but I think...
Well, you can refer to talk and see if it comes back to you. Let them humiliate themselves for a second.
What?
Construct Right Joe, do you have any last minute tips?
I gave mine. That was the whole have fun thing.
Alright, Let Joe, do you have any last minute tips?
I think my last would just be a summary of that. You know, have fun, keep it personal, when you're emotionally involved in your writing, other people are going to get emotionally involved. It's in the end, it's all for practice anyway. Don't take it too hard, but do your best.
And remember, you have to suck before you get good.
Yes.
That is a fact of life.
Yes. Yes, I could agree with that. Oh man, I still have my original works on film fiction, but
Yeah.
terrible.
I can relate. I think that is all the tips that the panelists seem to be willing to provide, and I think we've basically covered all the good points. And wow, that was quite a bit. We clocked about 2 hours and 3 minutes. Yeah, that was definitely pretty better structured than the last episode, where I was flying off the seat of my pants the whole time. But alas, this episode must come to an end. So before we say our goodbyes to our panel, of course, I must ask them some of our usual silly, fun questions that we like to ask at the end of every episode. We didn't get to come up with them last week since it was almost completely improvised, but we've definitely got some questions for our panelists today. So,
Oh dear.
BronyWriter, Laicho, and Penn, here's what I got for you. Your 3 questions are, your favorite original character, which can include your own. You just found out your best friend was or your special somebody is a changeling. What would you do? And the 3rd question is, in Equestrian Girls, we have a magic mirror that goes to different dimensions. We have one dimension with strangely colored humans that live in a high school, but what other dimensions do you think exist beyond that mirror? Pinstripe, why don't you take it away?
Okay, you gotta make sure I go down this list of questions for... Okay, can you repeat?
I will, don't worry. Calm down, it's okay. It's okay if you have memory of a goldfish, okay? Just kidding. first question.
It's hard when you give me 3 questions that require me to think about an answer. It's like I don't even know where to start at that point. It's like...
Alright, the first question. Your favorite original character, and it can include your own.
I can't... No original characters are popping to mind from other people's works. So I guess I have to just stick with mine since I know my characters, and I guess my favorite personal OC I've developed was at least just the funnest to write was Third Eye.
Okay, second question. You just found out your best friend or special sim pony is a changeling. What would you do?
I have no clue.
Why does nobody have to be fun to say in the what-if scenarios? Alright, so third question. The Equestrian girls with the different dimension mirror and stuff. What other dimensions do you think exist beyond that mirror?
The dimension of cake.
A dimension of cake.
Just like that is why Celestia keeps the mirror.
Couldn't resist the Celestia joke. Never
No.
No.
We've hit on the joke side. It's like we mentioned them and could not resist them.
Nope.
Alright, Laicho. Your turn for the spotlight. Who is your favorite original character, which can include your own? Your best friend or special sim pony is a changeling. What would you do? And what other dimensions do you think exist beyond that mirror?
Okay, well, for the first one, there's a tie, I think.
Uh-oh. That always stirs up drama.
Two original characters, neither of them my own, and one of them is more of a reimagining of Ditsy Doo. If anybody's ever read Shipping and Handling by Pegasus Rescue Brigade, that is a fantastic story.
I've not heard of it, but I have heard it is good.
It is great. The depiction of Ditsy is amazing. It's one of my most favorites to ever come out of fandom. And the second one is actually from a Human and Equestrian story that's also a crossover with the sci-fi universe that's written by my good friend Red Zamora. And his main character, Amber Jackson, is just the dynamics between him and the main 6, the way that he set it up, is pretty fantastic. And there's a lot in there. And I think that's why those are my 2 favorites. They're very, very much full of depth, and I can relate to them in different ways. They feel like real people. Alright, so the second one, Special Sim Pony was a changeling.
What would you do?
Well, I don't know. I still want to keep them alive, I guess, so I just have to keep loving them.
Okay.
I don't really want to be food either.
Well, that is a valid answer, I think. Alright, and what other different dimensions do you think exist?
Beyond the Looking Glass. I don't know. There are so many things. It would be really interesting if you could walk through a mirror and find a world that is the opposite of the one that you lived in. Like, I think what would definitely exist is just another copy of the universe where maybe a coin landed on tails rather than heads every time, you know. Maybe somebody went right instead of left. That would be cool. I think that's what's on the other side of the mirror anyway. Besides that devilishly handsome man.
Okay, well, that's a good idea. So, BronyWriter, what are your answers to my questions?
I think it's also a tie for me. Personal favorite other OC. This is reimagining, but we never see her character really in the show, is Hingard Cordas' imagining of Cloud Kicker as the ethical slut. Ethical slut who's also trying to live down the fact that she didn't join the Guard, just like every single other member of her family is pure guard all the way through, but she didn't. She's in the Ponyville weather team. And she has a love triangle going on, or a love square, actually.
Black love squares.
Love square that she's trying to set up with Blossom Forth Derpy and Fluttershy. But I think my personal favorite OC is in the Killer Rarity verse that I wrote. I'm working on currently the 4th story in that series. It's an alternate ending of the 3rd book. But basically, in the middle of the 2nd book, Sweetie Belle has a daughter named Joyous Blossom, but everyone calls her Blossom. And she didn't know that her aunt was a serial killer, Rarity. But she has to live down that legacy once she does find out. She's in constant fear of will I become a serial killer like my aunt? And in the 4th book, Word of Fear, she does, and it's a delight to write Blossom as a serial killer, just as good as it was to write Rarity as a serial killer.
Grimdark.
It's more tragedy than Grimdark. They're not violent stories. Yes, there are aspects that are violent. Rarity has.
I'd still technically say that's Grimdark because it's depressing.
I mean, yeah, there is violence. Rarity has a murder basement that she has, but
of course, you can't have murder without violence.
Yeah, but I don't go into
cupcakes.
I don't know. I do not go into cupcakes detail. I did, but then I decided it was dumb and I toned it down. Anyway, so I find out my girlfriend is a changeling. Oh man, the fun that I would have with that. I would have her impersonate celebrities and then walk down the street with her, or I come home one day and I said, hey, I found I don't know, Brad Pitt on the street and he wants to come have dinner with our family, or Peyton Manning, something. I'm a Broncos fan. Yeah, I'd have her impersonate celebrities and then just be seen hanging out with those celebrities. Maybe if it was a celebrity I didn't like, I'd ruin their reputation, but I don't know, I'm not that kind of sadistic kind of...
Interesting you had to say Peyton Manning, because you bastards stole them from us here in Indiana. You jerks.
Oh, yeah, I feel so bad for you. You got Andrew Luck now. You're doing okay.
Mm-hmm. And
we get to the playoffs.
Third question.
I think a universe exists where each one of the main 6 is a killer from a different universe. And they're all together. So, Cupcakes, Pinkie Pie, Rainbow Factory, Rainbow Dash, I don't know, Secret Life of Rarity, Many Experiments of Twilight Sparkle, Patty Cakes, Fluttershy, Applejack never really got a Grimdark.
I thought, wasn't Sweet Apple Massacre hers?
No, that was Big Macintosh. Applejack just, it's implied that he rapes and kills her at the end too.
Because, Applejack's just a support character.
Not even that. They mentioned her in a sentence. I think. I don't know. I skimmed it. I got like 2 sentences in and went, this is dumb. I did the same thing with Trixie's Funhouse.
That would be oddly appropriate, though. Applejack only getting a sentence. She has a nice background on me.
Yeah, I think an alternate universe exists where all of the main 6 are the serial killers from the popular fan works, but they all know as well. They all know that each other is this psychotic murderer.
It's why they're friends.
That's why they're friends.
This is why the enemies that go up against just don't live.
That's why they're secretly plotting how to murder each other.
They never kill with each other. It's not like Cupcakes, Pinkie Pie, and Rainbow Factory, Rainbow Dash go, you're my best buddy, let's go kill someone together. No. They all do their own thing, but they're all aware that each other is a serial killer from one of the popular Grimdarks.
BronyWriter, did anyone ever tell you you're a very disturbed human being? How do you know you're not a murderer over there?
Oh, I'm not a murderer. Not that you're aware of. I'm not a murderer. I just write murdery things.
Murdery things.
do that instead of actually doing it.
Alright, we're not going to dig too much into that. Anyway, okie doke. I think that covers our fun questions, sort of, and on a really grimdark note. But that was our episode of SD3 today.
That's the kind of note.
Indeed. But hey, in all seriousness, I hope you guys enjoyed our workshop and found it helpful for your writing. If it did, let us know on our YouTube channel below, whether you're on live stream or you're actually watching this on YouTube. That is regardless. If you have any suggestions on topics to cover or ways to improve our experimental workshop episodes, feel free to let us know that too. If you just want to tell us how much I suck at my job, or how much you enjoy seeing special guests, or have opinions of your own that you feel like sharing with the world, you can let us know in the same place too. Because options are great, aren't they?
Sometimes.
Anyway, guys, thank you very much for joining us today. You have all been tons of fun.
Oh, good.
Oh, yeah, it was my pleasure.
And no comment from Penstroke.
Thank you for having me.
There we go. I was
Waiting for everybody to get quiet so I can say it.
I love you too, Pastor.
Alrighty then. Yeah, I hope you guys might come back on a future episode someday, but for now, ladies and gentlemen, I have been your humble host, Misfortune. This has been Penstroke, Laichonious Raposo, and BronyWriter. And this has been another fun-filled episode of Stable Side Discussions, Disputes, and Debates. So that said, I will see you guys all next time, Stable Side.
See ya.